Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on the Federal News Network. We're talking about AI and ML, and we were just getting into sort of just the top line activities about what's happening across the departments and agencies. And Alan, I'm going to throw it over to you. Just give us a top line on what's happening in regards to Alteryx and how do you all fit into this ecosystem?
Thank you, Luke. It's great to be here. At Alteryx, we're really about enabling everyone to jump into this AI and ML pool. I'm really seeing this trend, and a couple of the panelists referred to it. The diversity of analytics is really increasing dramatically. We're starting to see it in every area of government, from local to state to federal. We're seeing it in every area of the government's mission. In every department. Pamela talked about the pandemic response as an example and a use case there. And I mean, if I look at the diversity of use cases that are happening just around COVID-19, from exploring potential drugs to monitoring metrics and seeing what cases are looking like, predicting hospital loads, HR analytics, looking at where employees are located. Did some work with the USDA. Where are all of their field offices, and what level of risk is each one of the offices in relative to COVID outbreak? And so you look at that across the full spectrum of all the agencies and all the different missions and all the different departments. The really exciting thing is the diversity of those use cases. When I look back in time, maybe the avian flu outbreak, Alteryx was used with the CDC and helping to speed up the response to that. But there were maybe a handful of use cases now the diversity of use cases is incredible. It's hard to keep up. And in Alteryx, that's what we're really about, is enabling everyone to be able to attack these problems using AI and ML.
Right, and you capstone several different activities that are going on across the departments and agencies. And Pam, you brought up a couple of really interesting ones, certainly timely. Can you give us a specific example of a project that you all are working on that's really helping to enable your agency's mission?
So one is the effort that we have to manage and track all the AI initiatives within the department. We needed to do a better job of portfolio management and really knowing what's going on within the department as well as what's lined up. So we literally are looking at what should we be doing next based on the data that we have. And then across the federal government, they continually ask, what are we doing in certain areas? What are the data sets, right? What is the inventory? And so we have, it seems like a fundamental activity, but we know today, for instance, that we have over 600 AI initiatives going on, and we know about how much we're spending on those initiatives. And we know the progression that we're making towards tangible outcomes. So that's one example. The other example that I wanted to share, though, is the humanitarian assistance. So by me being the senior agency official for geospatial information, I am fortunate enough to work a lot with the what's going on around the world and get more involved with that type of data and data analytics. Mm-hmm. And so the humanitarian assistance work, for instance, we're working with the first responders to help them to understand the perimeters of the fires. So for instance, before the wildfires break out, is there a potential that this is going to happen? And after they have transpired, what's the likelihood of the wildfire expanding? And then where are the other pockets? Are there hot pockets within the area? We also are looking at building damages and any type of damage assessments. Is there road obstructions that have transpired? So I'm fortunate enough to be able to work on these types of initiatives, which is all about data. So we're at this point, we're looking at imagery analytics and computer visioning, things like that, that absolutely requires the use of cognitive science and intelligence and artificial intelligence, machine learning, and I can't exclude natural language processing. We need all of those capabilities to really generate outcomes that really matter to the world. And that's what I'm most excited about and that's what I'm talking about today mostly, is the things that we're doing that I know we're making a difference in the world, and we're helping our first responders, and with the pandemic and all of that. Those are all things that are so important. Everything is important, right? The mission with the federal government is important, but I'm just pointing out a couple of significant undertakings that we are advancing and moving forward, because we're trying to help make the world a better place and save some lives.
And you certainly are. And if you think about the pandemic as an obvious one, the fires was another one, and geospatial, et cetera, that is bushels and bushels of data that has to be processed at, light speed. So I'm sure that's it's just fantastic the way this technology is allowing you all to make great informed decisions. Henry, how about over at Cloudera? Can you give us an example of a specific program that you've been able to help an agency work on to further their mission?
Yeah, I think one is really around, that's interesting, is working with a number of governments around national statistics. So think of U.S. Census Bureau and other countries' national statistics organizations. And what's interesting about these organizations is they're often some of the largest employers of data scientists, collecting vast amounts of information around their populations. And one of the great parts about it is that they're using machine learning to help predict things like economic activity, using their data sets to understand a clear view of how their economy is growing, shrinking, changing, and doing it in real time. And the same thing goes with how they're leveraging that data to understand their constituents. What is the movement of their population? Where do they need to make greater investments? How does that affect policy changes at the federal and state and local levels? And I think that's been an incredibly interesting set of use cases that Cloudera has been directly involved with in helping to make successful.
It really is incredible when you think about the rich capability and just the broad swath of ways that you can use this type of technology. Sanjay, we've heard a lot about activity over at SBA these days, and you gave us a great tutorial there, if you will, on sort of, consumers versus folks that are actually creating. Tell us about a specific project area that you might want to unpack for us and just sort of take us through that.
Sure. Thank you, Luke. And then I'll talk about the customer service hub. And so let me give a little quick context around it. Like most organizations at the SBA, we are receiving customer inquiries coming in through email channels. Obviously, we were flooded with those customer inquiries. And so we quickly implemented a case management system. So we took these emails coming in an automated manner, and then we created cases based on each email. And the one that I want to talk specifically about is using natural language processing and to do specifically sentiment analysis for these inbound emails. And that allowed us to sort of get a real-time or near real-time pulse of the customer sentiments in relation to the two major flagship programs, the PPP program and the EIDL program, the two loan programs that the SBA was chartered with. And that gave us a sense of what we needed to change from our frequently asked questions, what we needed to make changes in terms of customer service response, and how would the program maybe needed some tweaking as well. So I think this is one of the most important ones that I'll say is certainly customer facing. And obviously for us at the SBA, customer experience and improving customer experience has been at the forefront. And so this example I specifically chose for the case that it helps you and the audience understand how we used machine learning in this case to help improve the customer services and the customer experiences in a difficult and a trying time. There's probably more examples I can obviously talk about, but certainly this comes to mind as the forefront.
That certainly is fascinating, where you're able to read that and sort of get a pulse of the sort of the voice of the customer, if you will.
Exactly.
And be able to adjust accordingly. I think that's fascinating. Alan, how about over there at Alteryx in regards to, you know, a specific project, a specific effort that you've been involved in to help further an agency mission?
Yeah, so I will say this is a hard question. It's like picking your favorite child, right? You know, so many phenomenal use cases that we see across really almost all the agencies. But you know, one that comes to mind, you know, as hurricane season approaches, I think back to just a really great use case with FEMA and Homeland Security, where you know after Maria and Irma hit, there were well over 100,000 structures that were damaged. And the historic process is, you know, engineers have to assess those structures, figure out the level of damage to those structures to figure out how to rebuild. And, you know, obviously the faster that gets done, the faster recovery can begin and life can get back to normal. But when you have 100,000 structures spread across a couple Caribbean islands, this is quite a task. Using a traditional process of going and assessing each one with engineers and spending hours at every structure, this could have been a decade to assess all of these structures. And so armed with Alteryx and laptop computers, data from dozen sources, from satellite weather data to information about tides and flooding, the team was able to create models on the fly, basically take sample data, create models, and assess structural damage of these structures to quickly be able to assess which ones were under the threshold of a 50% damage, which ones were over, which ones actually needed the assessment by humans, speeding the recovery just dramatic amounts. And when I look at the impact that had on the lives of all of those people to be able to get back onto the road to recovery, it's just a massive impact. And then the spillover, now having a process that you can respond to future disasters and do it efficiently. You know, I think of examples like that. And again, I'm seeing these sorts of examples all over the place, but what a great use of technology, a great use of data to really impact people's life. And, you know, again, that's what makes us really excited at Alteryx, is to be able to enable people to do things exactly like that.
And at a time when they desperately need it, certainly, and
Absolutely.
when there's a lot of chaos out there, right? And things have to happen very quickly. There's a lot of uncertainty out there, et cetera. Riley, how about at the Air Force? I think about satellites. I think about embedded systems. You talked about the Jake. There's got to be a whole lot of activity there. Give us one example of where this technology is being used to sort of further the mission of the Air Force.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. I mean, part of what I need to do is kind of set the stage. However, you know, the Air Force does have several of these AI teams, you know, that house our specialists that are working this dark art in all kinds of areas. But first, there's a huge value, as you can appreciate, in attracting the right talent. Now, we see very quick results from, you know, our Boston Accelerator, Kessel Run, that, you know, leverages all this partnering with learned and vetted cutting edge companies, with academia, in fact, even with the companies that are on this panel today, as well as with our allies and partners. And this is a real key motivator, because they're working, you know, very specific and hard problems. But, you know, all due respect to those smart developers that, you know, that are living in their mom's basement with their blue hair, tats, earrings, and never kissed a girl, you know, we want this talent in our court. I make this point because the stakes are much higher in the military, because in many cases we're working around issues that involve putting lives at risk. So if I was to look at the Air Force Research Lab, you know, they have this autonomy collaboration team 3, Act 3, and they have a group of ninjas there that develop an AI platform. So let me give a shout out to, you know, Dr. Cap Rogers. He's developing an operational capability that kind of brings issues or brings experience to the last mile of military applications. So, you know, having the ability to verify and validate techniques for military purposes requires expertise beyond just algorithm development. You know, we have to have an understanding of what the outputs and development concepts, you know, we're going to be able to expect. You know, Google and Facebook publish all kinds of algorithms of trained instances, you know, TensorFlow is an example. You know, it's fine to start with this, but we must be able to train to military applications. You You simply can't start with an algorithm that identifies cats or puppies and apply it to finding tanks. So just to show the diversity of our projects, we have developed business processes, prototyped for solving problems in strategy planning, programming, budgeting, and our execution process. This is a very mundane, error-prone area, but it has allowed the Air Force to propose 3 times more planning choices in seconds, not weeks, for the same cost.
Yeah, I would say that the diversity in regards to how one would approach this capability is certainly significant. And being that the Air Force has a lot of diversity there, I think it's great that the way they're approaching that and doing it very aggressively, I might add. Jim, how about at Fortinet? Tell us about a specific project that you've been able to work on that's been able to further the mission of one of these agencies across the departments and agencies.
Luke, I've talked about how powerful AI and ML are for cybersecurity, but I recognize that there are a large number of federal networks where neither the data nor even the telemetry about the data can be allowed to go off premise or out of the network. So how do you do cybersecurity and leverage AI and ML for those cases without telling the customer, to use Sanjay's example, either build it yourself or you're out of luck? And Fortinet has been using AI and ML in production for security for 10 years. Not only has it gotten more powerful, but the corollary to that is the algorithms have gotten more efficient. And this year, we actually reached the point where we were able to deploy freestanding software-based versions of this, so that if you can't bring the data to the AI, you can send the AI to the data center or potentially even to the endpoints in the federal network. And these are not lightweight software appliances. These are full deep neural networks, 4-layer deep neural networks, so they can deal with fairly complex operating environments. And the studies have shown that within about 12 or 13 weeks, one of those deployments can be producing as much alerting as 3 or 4 full-time SOC analysts are. So that's a way of saying you can take this kind of capability and you can give it to federal customers to use in their own environment where they've got to be able to take care of themselves. They can't rely on external customers who need to export the data to handle it. So that's a very powerful capability that's just come online for us this year. And we're excited to be working with federal partners on that.
Are you able to implement something like that very quickly in regards to the departments and the agencies? Are they embracing that sort of wholeheartedly, if you will?
It just started coming online as a capability at the same time COVID hit. So we haven't been able to have a close dialogue with a lot of our typical federal channels to be able to say, here's a capability, do you want to start deploying it inside your network? But this is a full standalone commercial product. We call it, a virtual security analyst, but again, it's really a very powerful AI tool. So this is something that is now with us that I think will find federal partners more interested in using, because it gives them full control over the data with the power of these fully mature data analytics.
Interesting that you're able to take something that's been sort of hardened in the commercial environment, now port it over. I love that story. That sounds great. Well, we're going to take another short break and we'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on the Federal News Network.